Coming up, this will be the last Truth to Power video under a Conservative government. I'm pretty confident in saying that. After this coming week's general election, the Tory Party will be an irrelevance, consigned to the dustbin of history, along with those billions of pounds worth of unusable PPE sourced from their cronies and donors. So this week, referencing a very interesting article in the New York Times, I'm looking at all the factors that have led to this stupendous collapse in Tory support. Grab your popcorn and stay tuned. The Conservative Party's been in power for 14 years, lurching from crisis to crisis, most of their own making. There's a general feeling that the United Kingdom is broken, that the Tories have given us a small state, yet high-tax society. And the biggest question is, where has all the money gone? The answer in many cases is into the pockets of Tory donors and cronies, ranging from the dodgy VIP lane suppliers of PPE equipment during the pandemic, right through to the subsidies to this day handed out to the fossil fuel industry, and tax breaks given to private schools, non-doms and the very wealthiest in our society. No wonder voters aren't happy. And that means the Conservatives are likely to secure their lowest share of seats in Parliament in living memory. Before I explain exactly why, please take a moment to comment on this video, give it a like, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and share a link with your friends. The Brexit Party Limited, now rebranded as Reform UK Party Limited, have spooked the Conservative hierarchy for many years and have successfully dragged the Tory Party further and further to the hard right of British politics, meaning that the old-style one-nation Tory voters, who had a certain amount of compassion for the less well-off and a sense of decency, now feel more at home in Keir Starmer's Labour Party or with Ed Davey's Lib Dems. But as the Conservative Party do their best to form a Nigel Farage tribute act, another section of their base is deciding that they'd rather have the original xenophobic, insular, anti-immigrant party and intend to vote for Reform UK Party Limited. All that means that the Tories are polling consistently 20 points behind Labour, and since the start of the election campaign, there's been little movement in that gap. I always find it fascinating to look at the foreign press for a truly objective take on the state of British politics, and the New York Times this week published a brilliant article taking a closer look at the British Conservatives. Some of the key reasons they identified for the collapse of the Tory party were: 1. Voters feel the country is worse off. 2. They feel the Conservative Party has left Britain in a worse state than before it came to power. 3. Promising to finalise Brexit was a big vote winner for the Conservative Party in the last election, but this time, they say, the biggest issues are the economy and healthcare, followed in a distant third by immigration. And voters think Labour is better prepared to handle all three, according to recent polling from YouGov. The New York Times had some interesting ideas as to why that might be. On the economy, they point out that Rishi Sunak's predecessor, Liz Truss, set off an economic crisis after she announced those bizarre Tufton Street orchestrated plans for massive tax cuts for the rich, wild financial deregulation, and a consequent ballooning of the national debt. On health, the article highlights that 7.5 million people are now waiting for elective care from the National Health Service, which is triple the number when the Conservatives took power in 2010. Under the Tories, our NHS has gone from having the highest patient satisfaction numbers in history under the Blair-Brown government to having the worst satisfaction numbers in history thanks to the 5 Tory clowns that have occupied the highest office in the land over the last 14 years. And on immigration, the NYT says that despite Conservative pledges to reduce immigration, net migration reached an all-time high in 2023. Now, OK, the New York Times could be described as a left-leaning newspaper, but it is frequently voted to be in the top 10 most trusted sources of news on this planet, along with Associated Press, Reuters, The Guardian, and still, believe it or not, the BBC. But they have no skin in the game in UK politics, so I think it's really interesting to hear the New York Times explanation of the demise of the Tories, which the article puts down to both the steep spending cuts after the 2009 financial crisis When David Cameron's government catastrophically decided that austerity would restore public finances, and his divisive Brexit referendum in 2016. Of course, since the last general election, the government has had to grapple with COVID-19, an energy crunch after Russia cut gas supplies to Europe, and high inflation. But they've also lurched through a series of self-inflicted crises, cycling through 3 prime ministers and 5 chancellors in less than 5 years. More than half the people who voted for the Conservatives in the last election tell pollsters that they now plan to vote for a different party this time round. Fewer than half of 2019 Tory voters say that they're sticking with the party this time. A third said they would switch to the Reform UK Party Limited. 11% plan to switch to Labour, 6% for the Liberal Democrats, and 3% for other parties. Age is the main predictor of political support in Britain, with Conservatives winning more older voters. In the last election, the age at which someone was more likely to vote Conservative than Labour was roughly 40 years or older. 2024 polling suggests the Tories are only ahead in one age group, people aged over 65. And even in this oldest age group, support has dropped from 64% last time down to 34% this time, with 20% of that group now supporting Labour, who've gained support in every age group except the 18 to 24-year-olds, who are increasingly tilting towards the Greens and the Lib Dems. Interestingly, the New York Times article suggests that this may be related to Keir Starmer ruthlessly moving the party to the centre ground since taking over, alienating some of the party's more left-wing supporters. The 18 to 24-year-old age group are also turned off by Starmer's U-turn on a pledge to spend £28 billion per year on a green investment plan, saying that the country could no longer afford it. And he's been way less critical of Israel over civilian deaths in Gaza than many Labour supporters would like. Starmer remains unpopular, surveys show, although his standing in polling has improved throughout this campaign. I wonder if you caught the John Oliver diatribe against the Tories in his late-night American chat show last week tonight. But he explained in that show why the Labour Party could be so far ahead in the polls despite being about as exciting as an England football team performance at Euro 24.
If a wild badger broke into your home and fucked everything up for 14 years straight, tearing absolutely everything apart, you might think, well, you know what? We'll argue about redecorating choices later. Right now, that badger's gotta fucking go.
And look, in any case, to be fair to Keir Starmer and his Labour Party, maybe with the exception of Tony Blair back in 1997, opposition parties that come to form a government generally win an election more because of the performance of the last government rather than any real sense of excitement about the incoming party. And that's why the polls are suggesting a Labour landslide. Another factor this time around is the hard-right Reform UK Party Limited, now led by Trump's buddy and Putin's useful idiot, Nigel Farage, who's inexplicably been given a platform on the mainstream British media for the last 10 years to promote his virulent brand of hate-based, plastic patriot, anti-immigrant divisive politics. The media's nurturing of Farage has now provided him with a celebrity that those very same broadcasters are now using as a justification to continue to showcase him way out of proportion to other smaller parties who have a far larger representation in Parliament. Farage says he hopes to be a candidate for Prime Minister at the following election. He doesn't seem to realise we don't elect candidates to the post of Prime Minister in this country. That's more for his buddy Trump's America. But we'll let that one go. In any case, he and his party only seem to have an appeal to a limited demographic: white, working class, less educated people who overwhelmingly voted for Brexit. You can see on this map the very few constituencies where Reform Party UK Limited might win, and it appears to be a maximum of 5 seats out of a possible 650. Unlike the Liberal Democrats, Reform UK Party Limited's voter base is spread thinly across the country, and while that makes it difficult to win seats, it could split the right-wing vote across the country, like the left-wing vote has been split between multiple parties for decades. allowing the Tories to remain in power despite only a minority of the electorate actually voting for them. But this new vote split on the right means the impact of Reform UK Party Limited will go far beyond those 5 constituencies, drawing support overwhelmingly from previous Tory voters and handing victory to Labour and the Lib Dems across dozens of constituencies that were previously considered Tory strongholds. With a landslide parliamentary majority for Labour based on a mere 40%-ish vote share, and with Reform UK Party Limited getting less than 1% of parliamentary seats despite polling at around 15%, I think the first past the post system is going to come in for an awful lot of stick in the next parliament. And despite the fact that I personally don't want to see Reform UK Party Limited with 15% of parliamentary seats, a move to an electoral system based on some kind of proportional representation would almost certainly guarantee a progressive government in the UK for decades to come and lock the Conservative Party out of power forever.